All right, so the broadcast has now started again, um, and I guess we're here now. Hopefully, the elections go smoother tomorrow than this. But so, welcome back, everyone, to our final segment of our Vote Proud New York initiative. This has been absolutely incredible. Louis Bradbury, we've been hosting this together since September. And we've had a lot of great discussions leading up to what is going to be Election Day tomorrow. We have some great guests with us tonight. Actually, more than guests, they're our co-hosts for the entire show. So, Louis, what do you want to say?
Well, welcome, and we're down to the wire. And this week, I was poll watching for the Democrats, and I'm happy to say that out on eastern Long Island, the lines were long, people were patient, they were wearing masks, there were no incidents, and I hope that's an omen for what's going to happen tomorrow, but we'll see.
Excellent, excellent. So let me, so for folks out there who are watching maybe for the first time, and by the way, we've had well over 100,000 people that have tuned into our Vote Proud New York segments since September. So that's absolutely amazing. Hopefully every single one of them voted or registered to vote and has either voted early or will be voting tomorrow. But LGBT Network Vote Proud New York initiative is a mobilization and organizing campaign to get every LGBTQ and allied New Yorker to participate in the 2020 election. Our voices are real important, and we're going to talk about why it's so important, what's at stake. I think we all know what's at stake, but it can't hurt to say that again. But you know, as I said earlier, we have some great guest co-hosts with us here tonight. So let's just go around the bend. Let me tell you a little bit about each of the folks who are on screen with us. We have New York State Controller Tom DiNapoli, who has been a public official for 4 decades. He served as the New York State youngest elected official when he won a school board election. When he won school board election at the age of only 17, and right now he's only 22. But at the age of 17, he has served as one of New York's top assembly members until becoming New York State Controller in 2007, where he has done just such amazing work on behalf of all New Yorkers, but really out there protecting LGBTQ New Yorkers. His entire career being a huge supporter of the LGBT network and receiving our Lifetime Achievement Award as well. So welcome, Tom.
Thank you, David, very much. Thank you. And technically, I was 18, just to make clear that I was legal, but I had just turned 18 when I was elected. And so I had that unusual experience of my very first vote was for myself, which is a strange dynamic. But that year was also a presidential year, like we're going through right now, with tremendous energy and involvement. It's great to hear Louis's commentary that the lines are long on the East End. I know Robert and I are on the western part of Long Island. We've seen long lines out here as well. And I think that just speaks to how important everybody understands this year is. And I really want to commend you, David, and the network for everything you've been doing to get the word out about Vote Proud, and certainly the town halls that you've done as well through this pandemic. My compliments to Sammy and the board and you and your team. And it's great that Louis has been helping out as well with these forums, and Robert is always on CNN and beyond. It's great that he's with us, and I know you can have Richie Torres. I was with him in the Bronx last week. He's going to be our new congressman, our first LGBT member of Congress of color from New York. I think in the country, right? And he's just great. Danny Drum, an incredible leader as well. So you've got quite a lineup. I just want to, restate the obvious. Elections matter. We've learned that the hard way. I know we want everyone to vote, regardless of their position and point of view. I'm a well-known Democrat, so folks know where I come from, where I hope it ends up tomorrow. But whatever your position is, vote. And obviously, it's not just presidential. I mean, presidential is key when you think about LGBTQ rights, when you think about healthcare. When you think about selection of judges, including for the highest court, how important that's been. So presidential race is key. Congressional races as well. We don't have any U.S. Senate races in New York, but we have very hotly contested congressional races on Long Island in a couple of districts, in Staten Island, Brooklyn, and upstate as well. So, evaluate the candidates. And let's not forget the state legislative races. All the state senators, all the state assembly members, all those seats are up. Some of them are open seats. Many of them have incumbents. And David, from your incredible advocacy, very successful advocacy over the years, what a difference the state legislature has made. Certainly this past year finally passed Agenda, the ban on conversion therapy, but you go back over the years, the hate crime legislations, the Sonda legislation, Dignity for All Students Act, marriage equality. Again, David, hats off to you for being a catalyst and a leader in that regard. The state legislators have as much of impact, sometimes even more, than the federal offices that are on the ballot. So, if you haven't voted yet, I haven't. I'm voting tomorrow. There's still time to check out who the candidates are. There are a lot of judgeships on the ballot. For those on Long Island, almost all of them, if not all of them, are cross-endorsed, so you don't have much of a choice there. But if you do have a contested judicial race, judges matter as well. So what's the main message? Get out and vote. Turnout is key. Every vote matters. Unfortunately, we know, and Robert knows this probably best because he watches the national scene, the lawyers are lined up already on both sides. And we need to see that there's a big vote that sends a clear mandate so it doesn't end up in the hands of the lawyers and the courts. To me, that would be the worst possible outcome if that's how we end tomorrow night, and others may have thoughts about that. But certainly in terms of the issues related to the LGBTQ community, what an incredible difference. Who is our president and vice president? Who will be our members of Congress? Who will be our senators and our members of assembly? Look at the candidates, look at their records, look at what they say, but more importantly, look at what they've done over the years, and make sure that you vote, that your friends and family members vote. I mean, it is encouraging that so many folks have been voting absentee and early voting, but the polls are open till 9 o'clock tomorrow. Make sure everybody is out. Express your opinion. We may have our differences on certain issues, but we cannot disagree about the importance of everybody being at the table. And for this community particularly, when LGBTQ people and their friends have asserted themselves, they have made an incredible difference. There's still an unfinished agenda in so many areas, and David, will look to your leadership to help guide us on where we go next in terms of making progress to a more inclusive and diverse society. But it all starts with the men and women who we're going to choose on Election Day tomorrow. Yep,
that's a great way of framing the importance of tomorrow, from national all the way down to very local. And each one is very important. Has an impact on our lives. Tom, if you want to please stay, because we're going to introduce Robert and Sammy. And so I'm looking for what it says, even though I know them very well. But so Robert Zimmerman is a great friend, but he's a member of the Democratic National Committee. As Tom said, as our controller said, you can see Robert Zimmerman on CNN and MSNBC. Not on Fox News, though, right, Robert? But
on occasion.
News. Okay. And Robert is a public relations executive. Is also one of New York's top top Democrats. He was nominated by President Obama to serve as a member of the National Council on Humanity, was appointed by President Clinton to serve on the Kennedy Center Performing Arts Commission, and so much more that we're going to get into soon. And as Tom said, we could see Robert on CNN frequently, really talking about the issues that are facing the Democratic Committee, the Democrats all over the nation, and what needs to be done. And Robert was also recently honored by the LGBT Network with our coveted Lifetime Achievement Award as well. So welcome, Robert. And then we also have Sammy Chu, who is our board chair, who's the LGBT Network board chair, and has been so for the last couple of years. And Sammy is a major player in the Long Island philanthropic community, serving on many different boards, but we got him to be our board chair. And he's the chairman also of the U.S. Green Building Council's Long Island chapter and CEO for Edgewise Energy. He's a longtime government and political leader, formerly acting as the deputy county executive for Suffolk County, where we met on a panel. Sammy turns much of his attention to issues that affect the most vulnerable Long Islanders, and is currently chair of the board for the LGBT Network, as I said. So welcome both Sammy and Robert. And And is there something that you guys want to say as just an introduction, and also Louis, before we bring on Richie Torres, who we hear is in the green room?
Sure. First of all, thank you, Louis and David, for doing this and bringing us together, especially right before the election. First of all, the network has performed a life-saving mission for Long Island and Queens. We're so grateful to you for that. And Sammy, your leadership as chair of the board has really gave this place, given it a future, given it really a sense of destiny, a sense of permanence, which is so important. Now, Tom DiNapoli, our state controller, did not tell you this, so I will. He got the first grant for the LGBTQ network. And if it wasn't for him, we might not have been here. And frankly, I am so excited to be on the same platform with Danny Drum. I have admired his career, and not just as a leader in city government, but certainly as a pioneer for our community. I mean, he created the first liaison for the LGBTQ community with the Department of Education, organized the first gay rights parade in Queens, celebrating our rights and our freedoms. He has not just been a pioneer, but he's given so many of us a voice and so many of us a future through his leadership. So what a treat to have him here. And of course, Richie Torres. Wow. I mean, he has made history and is making history tomorrow night as the first elected member of Congress from the LGBTQ community. He is a great voice for so many people who don't have a voice, both in the city and will be, I think, I'm telling you this, a great national spokesperson, a great national leader in Congress. It's a great platform for him because he speaks to urban needs, speaks to the needs of the LGBTQ community, is a great dynamic young leader. So I'm so excited to watch his career officially launch tomorrow night with his election to Congress and his heroic efforts in this campaign. And already he's had a great national voice. There's one thought I want to give all of you who are listening and participating today. I guarantee every one of you who's engaged with this program or watching this program has a friend, a relative, someone in your life who has not yet voted. Maybe they didn't fill out the absentee ballot they said they were going to fill out. Maybe they just didn't make a plan to vote. But if you can find them, if you can seek them out, and you can find a couple of people amongst yourselves and bring them to the polls and get them registered. You don't know where to vote? Call the LGBTQ network. We'll tell you where to vote. It's easy to do. The lines will not be long tomorrow, and we're there to assist. But it is so critical for everyone listening because you all have in your orbits people who have not voted. And I'll tell you why it matters. It matters because, when you say vote like our lives depend on it, we should be voting tomorrow like our rights depend on it. Because everything is on the line. All the achievements that Danny Drum put in place, that Tom DiNapoli is a great ally of our community, led the fight for. Tish James is advocating as Attorney General. Rich Torres represents and is advocating for all the rights we believe in, that Dave, you have championed with Sammy and Louis, are on the line in this election. And so it is, think about it for a moment, the right to, in fact, have gay couples adopt children, job security. The court may have ruled, but there are executives ordered undermining many of these rulings by the president. And there are members of Congress undermining our rights, if not deliberately attacking them. And you don't have to look too far, except look to Long Island. Don't have to look around the South or parts of the country. Just look at home. In the 3rd Congressional District, Nancy Gore versus Lee Zeldin. 2nd Congressional District, Lieutenant Jackie Brown, who's running. Is that right? I got her name right?
Jackie Gordon.
Jackie Gordon, sorry. There's another candidate I know actually running Jackie Brown. Jackie Gordon running, not just a champion as an educator and a public official, a former lieutenant colonel in the Army. They're running, advocating our rights and standing up for us. So your votes matter. Don't think because New York State is blue, your votes don't make a difference. Don't think because all your friends have voted and you feel you live in a safe district, it doesn't matter. It matters. Having your voice heard, bringing your friends to the polls, and looking at those state legislative races like Controller DiNapoli pointed out, that impacts us so profoundly, looking at those congressional seats where we can choose the direction of our country. That's what tomorrow is all about. It's about saving our democracy and standing up for our future. So please remember to vote if you haven't, and most importantly, find your friends who have it and bring them to the polls.
Thank you, Robert. And then so we have Sammy, and then I think Danny has joined us, right? Hey, Danny. How are you? I've heard a little bit about Danny, but let me just tell you, and then we'll just, again, get right into it, although we're already into it. But Danny Danny and I have been, oh my God, for 3 decades working together, way back when, and starting the Pride parades on Long Island and in Queens, respectively. Danny now is the New York City Council Finance Chair, council member, is a former educator. His district represents Jackson Heights and Elmhurst, Queens. He's been a pioneer for the LGBT community, acting as a chief advocate for LGBTQ rights and ensuring a huge initiative was passed that LGBTQ health and human services could be provided throughout all 5 boroughs. A former school teacher, we can go on and on and on. So welcome, Danny, welcome, Sammy, welcome, Robert, and Tom. And so, Louis, I'm going to turn it over to you so we just get right into it. And then we're going to bring Richie on shortly.
Okay, well, this question for Tom. Our good friend, mutual friend, Stuart Applebaum, suggested I give you some questions, some of which I'll leave for a later time. One of them, we're all, I think, have been very effective in telling people why they should vote. But one of the things that's come up recently is that what are people's fears of voting and security tomorrow? We've seen many stories about Republicans hiring 40,000 people to go to polls. My personal experience poll watching this last week was quite different. It was very peaceful in the East End. There was no one harassing from any side. But what has the state done to make sure that we can give assurance to our listeners that it's safe to vote tomorrow? They don't have to worry about pictures being taken or names, license plates taken or whatever.
Yeah, that's a good question, Louis. And Stu Applebaum, what a great union leader and a great advocate for LGBTQ issues, and serves with Robert on the DNC as well. New York has done a great deal on the security end, but I think from my point of view, especially downstate, I think the concern for security is, in my mind, secondary to the concern for efficiency. So, one of the real problems we have, and we certainly see it for those that are voting in the boroughs, there really were not adequate opportunities for early voting, which is why you had the long lines. Now, you could argue that part of that is that first time we've done it this way, weren't sure what to expect, a presidential year, very contentious election, should have anticipated that more people would have turned out and we needed more polling sites. Lessons learned. And so one of my concerns is really more on the issue of what about the folks, and I've heard from people who showed up for early voting and the line was too long and they left. Did they come back for another early voting day? Are they going to be there tomorrow? Did they take the time to do an absentee ballot? There's an issue about the efficiency of the Board of Elections really all across the state that, our office has done some audits on this. One of the audits that we did a few years ago involved the vendors that were being used by the local boards to print ballots. Well, gee, what a surprise. One of the vendors that we cited as having some problems was the vendor that you read about. I think it was in Nassau and Brooklyn, at least, if not some other parts of New York City, where people got ballots that were stamped military, with a lot of confusion. So, I think, I personally don't worry about people taking pictures or, the big thing that always comes up. I had this conversation the other day with someone. If I vote, I'll be called for jury duty. That's jury duty lists are not taken from the voting list. That's something from, 40 years ago, maybe, but doesn't exist now. So I would say for folks, certainly with the problems that have been identified, from the state board, they have given directives for the local boards to get their act together. Is it going to be perfect? Maybe not, but from a security perspective, I think they've straightened out the glitches that were there in terms of some of the inappropriate ballots that were first sent out. In terms of the efficiency, we'll see what happens tomorrow, Louis. I mean, it's not easy to be an inspector. It's very hard to get inspectors. they are often people who may not be as adept at being there from 5 in the morning till the polls are closed to prepare for the opening at 6. I just would ask folks, be patient, be tolerant, but don't get turned off if you end up with an inspector that can't find your name on the list because they can't hear how you're spelling it. I mean, I've had that situation happen at my polling place, and I'm probably one of the better known people in my area. And who are you? How do you spell that? Where are you? I don't see you on the list. Well, no, I'm right there. My concern, Louis, would be more for people to have patience, because there probably will be as big a turnout tomorrow as there've been on early voting. But people should have, I think, from my point of view, relative confidence that in New York, from a security point of view, not to worry, and we'll make sure that all the votes are going to be counted. It may take a while to get it done. We'll make sure that counted, though.
Thank you.
Excellent. So, let's bring Richie on, because I know that Richie is one of those folks that's going to be on the ballot, and Sammy will be back in a second. But Richie is on the ballot tomorrow, and Richie Torres is a congressional candidate and also a New York City councilman currently, and is the first openly gay candidate to be elected to legislative office in the Bronx, as well as the youngest city council member. So we have two youngins that were elected, making history on our broadcast today. He won a primary in June that has teed him up to win, defeating one of the most anti-gay elected officials, Ruben Diaz. And so he won that primary in June for tomorrow's congressional race that will make him one of the first, and maybe the first of two in New York State, openly African-American gay males to be elected to Congress. So welcome, Richie.
It's an honor to be here.
Thank you. So we have a great panel here today, and I'm going to open it up to the panel to ask questions to Richie, to talk. But how do you feel about your chances tomorrow?
I am supremely confident. I'm cautiously optimistic about the Democratic Party at large, and I feel like I went from the hardest possible primary to the easiest possible general election. So as the Democratic nominee in the most Democratic district, I feel as confident as I could be. And I just want to say it's an honor to be here with several friends. Robert, thank you for the kind words earlier. Tom DiNapoli. Danny Drum is an icon. I remember when I first ran for the city council back in 2013, I was scared and anxious because of people like Ruben Diaz Sr. And one of the people who said that he was going to support me from day one was Danny Drum. So thank you for believing in me, Danny, and betting on me and inspiring me with your lifelong commitment to LGBTQ equality.
Thank you. So I'm opening it up to the panel. Questions?
I've got a question for Danny. This is Robert Zimmerman. Dan, so we're going into a general election, and we're facing basically an assault on everything we believe in and hold true to ourselves, not just by Donald Trump as the most visible spokesperson, but by the Republican collaborators and enablers around them. And a number of Democrats who won't stand up either, and Richie Torres, who slayed one of them beautifully and heroically in your primary. But the question is, how do we ultimately, in your borough of Queens, in the city of New York, how do we in fact move forward beyond the vile rhetoric we've had to endure, the divisive policies we've had to endure? How do we move forward in terms of broadening our coalition? Because we really have to, in my view, when this election's over and God willing, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are elected, and we have a Democratic Senate, we have to really make sure that we promote more people running for office who represent our points of view, and we build on what we hope will be the success of tomorrow. How do we move forward in that regard?
Oh, thank you very much, Robert. It's great to be here. Thank you, David, for inviting me. Of course, let me recognize our role controller, Tom DiNapoli, our fantastic candidate, Richie Torres, who, yes, when he was running, I said, Richie, make sure you come out to your mother before you make it public that you're running for city council. And of course, Sammy Chu and Tish James as well. It's very difficult. I have a house up in Margaretville, New York, and I see a lot of Trump signs around, although I also see a number of Biden signs. But, for me, I think one thing that makes a difference is making sure that we have this grassroots organizing going. And I go back to the early days of starting Queen's Pride, and David probably can relate to this as well in Long Island. A lot of people thought that LGBT rights were for those people who lived in Manhattan, in Greenwich Village.
Sure.
But in fact, I think the majority of LGBT people live outside of Manhattan, to be honest with you. And how did we win in Queens? How did we turn things around in Queens? I think the way we did it was by letting people know who we are. I like to use the term we're your family, your friends, neighbors, and we're everywhere. And so specifically speaking to the gay rights issue, I think that's what we got to do. But I think that also holds true for other folks as well. What I tell these Trump supporters is that they're terrified. Many of them live in poverty themselves, and they don't see themselves fitting into the Biden agenda. And one of the things that we've got to do is to make clear with the next president, hopefully Biden, that, the Democratic Party is the big party, the big tent. We include everyone. And I think that with some of the policy changes that Biden will implement gives us again the possibility to bring people together. He's spoken eloquently on this issue. Joe Biden has spoken very well on this issue. And so I think with him in that position as president, he will set a tone in the country that will begin to bring us back together. If we ever really were back together, but these last 4 years have just so horrible. So I think it has to happen person to person. And I think that's when we'll get it accomplished.
Well, thanks. Thanks, David.
That's a great answer. It's very insightful because I think in the past 4 years, we've seen a legitimacy or an acceptance of a kind of language we would never have tolerated or excused or rationalized. And he has tried to make it mainstream. And I do believe decency wins. I believe love wins. And I believe respect wins. So I hope you're right, Danny. I think you've certainly proven that it can happen under your leadership.
Pete Buttigieg just wrote a book called Trust. And I think what we have to do is build trust with people, that government can work for them. That is really, really important to folks. Because
Richie Torres' victory proves the point.
Fiction. We don't know what's fact.
Yeah, but Richie Torres' victory proves your point. That really does. What a great inspired victory that was.
All right, cool. So, Louis, I think you had a question for Richie.
Yeah, I think, I have actually one that might be best for Tom and Danny, but Richie can answer too, because hopefully we will be in Congress, and that will be an important part of what I'm about to ask. We have a pandemic. We haven't mentioned that because we don't want to think about that. But it's affected our lives greatly, everyone individually, in a variety of different ways. But it's affected the city and the state in New York greatly because of our budgets. I've read many of your reports, Tom, and we know the city is having a struggle. How do you see the priorities for the city and state coming out of these budget shortfalls that we'll probably have for a year? And how does that affect the grants, both existing and current, for many social service agencies, particularly LGBT organizations? And I think it might be, we're talking about voting, but this is very important as to how many people will be able perhaps to survive through the next several months of this pandemic.
I mean, Louis, it's a key question from the state perspective. We are dealing with a significant budget shortfall, a gap about $14.5 billion for this current budget year. The city has over $9.5 billion over the next year and a half or so. Danny, I'm sure, could speak to how the city is managing it. In the short run, the governor, through the division of the budget, has been withholding certain payments. So you're absolutely right. Many nonprofits throughout the state, expecting certain grant money, certain reimbursements for services provided, have found that the check is not in the mail, if we could put it that way. And our office can't cut the check or submit the payment unless we get the final sign-off prior to our doing that from the Division of Budget and the state agency involved. I know that's created a lot of frustration, but what the governor is trying to do is manage cash flow. So he has not said that these delays in payments will be permanent cuts. They could, in fact, be permanent cuts. And the real issue, both for the city and the state, and I have to add for the MTA as well, the subways and the trains, is really the need for additional federal stimulus and relief. Again, underscoring the importance of this election in terms of who's the president, who will be in charge of the Senate as well. The House has passed 2 iterations of the HEROES Act with money for states and localities, including New York City and New York State, money for the MTA. Thus far, the Senate hasn't gone along. The White House has been back and forth. It would make a big difference, not to be partisan. I know this is a nonpartisan get out the vote discussion, but a Democratic Senate and a Democratic president committed to repairing the economic fallout that resulted from COVID-19, the economy being on hold, government revenues being down because of the lack of economic activity. That really is what we need to be sure that the nonprofits won't see their delay in payments from the state turn into permanent cuts. And I'll end on this and turn over to Danny. The problem we face is that it is not a one-year problem. It's very clear that the economic damage is going to create limitations for us, for at least 2 to 3 years before we see revenue coming back to the expected levels. It means that the folks we elect for Congress and certainly at the local level for state legislature, they're going to be confronted with many tough choices on spending, on revenue, meaning taxes, on borrowing. But what is certainly clear to me is that the connectedness between New York State's fiscal strength and solvency, New York City's, and the MTA, the 3 are tied together. And Louis, it does get back to your opening point. It does get back to the pandemic and healthcare. We need a vaccine, and we need a vaccine so that this economy can open up again, because that's really the ultimate solution. People working, people paying taxes, people going to restaurants and shows and spending money. That's what we need. But in the short run, we need additional federal help. Without that, it's going to be a very problematic solution for us to navigate through the next few months and the next couple of years.
Yes. So,
objective, David, speaking objectively, not being partisan, Chuck Schumer as Majority Leader of the Senate, Joe Biden as President of the United States will be there for New York and will stand up for New York. And we know what the alternative represents because we've seen what they've done to New York. Just speaking objectively.
Sure. And Richie, I mean, you're going to have a major role in this after tomorrow night when you're elected to Congress. So, I mean, and you've seen it from, being a council member on the impact locally. What do you think you're going to be able to, you're going to be another strong voice, but that similar to how you've been in the New York City Council. So what do you see that you're going to be able to do after being elected tomorrow night?
Look, I'm cautiously optimistic. If the Democratic Party wins the presidency in the Senate and retains the House, then we will have the makings of an FDR moment. We will have a once-in-a-century opportunity to govern as boldly in the 21st century as FDR did in the 20th century. And New York State and New York City and the MTA cannot survive 4 more years of Donald Trump. Right? There's never been a moment in the history of our state or city where the state government, the local government, and the MTA were all caught in a fiscal death spiral. Right? Only the federal government can run a deficit, and only the federal government has the resources to stabilize our public transit system, which is the lifeblood of our city and our state and local governments, and put people back to work through massive investments in infrastructure, and put income in the pockets of working people and struggling families whose spending would have the greatest impact in breathing new life into our economy. So the future of the economic interests and the moral values of our country depends on a democratic sweep of all branches of government.
Mm-hmm. Yes, definitely. And, you know, and not, I'm going to switch a little bit here and just ask you, you know, so tomorrow night, you know, you're going to become the first openly gay elected African-American congressman in New York and the nation also? Or?
Afro-Latino.
You know, so the first one. So what would what kind of impact do you think this has on an 11-year-old Richie Torres now, who's looking at you getting elected tomorrow? What does that say to our younger generation?
Look, I hope it inspires a sense of belonging. You know, all Americans have a right to belong to their government. All Americans, including a young Richie Torres, should see themselves in their elected leadership. You know, for our democracy to be truly representative, it must be every bit as diverse and dynamic as America itself. And I'm about to enter the most diverse legislative conference in the history of our country. More than 60% of the Democratic Conference in the House, LGBTQ, women, and people of color. You know, that is the future of this country. And I hope that I represent the possibility that a poor kid or a kid of color or an LGBTQ kid from places like the Bronx can overcome the odds and become a member of the world's greatest legislature, the United States Congress.
Mm-hmm. That's a powerful, powerful message that, you know, will not only give hope, but save lives, you know, and we can't thank you enough for doing that. So, Danny, I think the question was asked to you as well, sort of going back, but just quickly, you know, how would you follow up on Robert's earlier question? Lewis's question about the pandemic.
Sure. So right now, you know, we're facing a tremendous possibility of a budget deficit that Control Dentally already said is going to probably be somewhere in the area of about $9 billion. And unless we get some help from the federal government, we are not going to be able to do that without layoffs in the city. In addition to that, and I think Lewis was referring to the nonprofits as well, we're facing an issue where nonprofits were promised money, indirect service providers were promised money that they haven't seen yet either. And they're still being promised it, but they need to have the cash flow as well. And those indirect service providers, those nonprofits, are the ones who are providing services to the communities most in need during the pandemic. So we are in a really, I don't really have any hope that the federal government under Trump would give us any relief in the city. And that's why I think it's so really important that we make sure that Biden is elected tomorrow. You know, Richie alluded to, you know, him being a model. He is a fantastic role model for young people to get involved and to do what Richie did, what he did, and then to have that influence in terms of shaping the budget and the priorities for the United States of America moving forward. And I could do it. If Richie could do it, other young people can do it as well. So this budget, the 2021 budget, because we're always like a year ahead in fiscal year, was difficult, and we faced really some difficult choices. There was a whole group of folks that wanted us to defund the police and, you know, put more money into social services. We attempted to do that, not as well as we would have liked to have done it. But, you know, and it's also just not that simple to do. You know, we do need to have police, and what's the balance there? So next year's, the 2022 budget is going to be even more difficult. And I don't know that we get out of this until about 2025, long after I'm out of the city council, unless we get some type of federal help. And that's really where we're at this point.
All right, so we got some tough times ahead of us. I think we all know that. Tomorrow is a big day. Is a big day, and I think what now would be a good time to actually show. Tish James filmed a special video for us, and maybe we could show that, then come back and have everyone comment on that. So let's get the video of Tish James up soon.
The 2020 presidential election is now just 1 day away. And as we know, this is an election unlike any other. Unprecedented numbers of mail-in ballots have already been cast. Several early voting states across the country experience tremendously long lines. Yet our work is far from over. Tomorrow is Election Day, and millions of voters will head to the polls to cast their ballot for the future of this nation. Make no mistake, it is the people who show up to vote and who will decide the outcome of this election and thereby the future of America. Every vote counts, and every vote must be counted. After all, fair and free elections are a bedrock of American democracy, and I am committed to protecting every person's right to vote free from harassment or intimidation. And that is why my office has ramped up our election protection hotline this year. Should we receive any reports of voter intimidation, harassment, or misinformation, we stand ready to respond immediately and assist New Yorkers in exercising their right to vote. At a time when the voices of freedom, equality, and justice for all are rising from every corner of our nation, we will not allow any voter to be intimidated into silence. Sadly, the LGBTQ+ community has borne witness and experienced far too much harassment and oppression. I want to reassure you that as you go to the polls and as you encourage others to go to the polls tomorrow, the full weight of the New York State Attorney General's office stands ready to support and protect you. You can call our hotline and report any problems at the polls. That number is 1-800-771-7755. Your voice and your vote matters. And it is so critically important that you raise your voice and exercise your right to vote this year. The stakes could not be higher. We are all counting on one another, and I hope you know that you can always count on me. So tomorrow, go out and vote proud, and then help others get out and vote proud as well. Thank you. New York State Attorney General Letitia James.
All right, so that was Tish's message. So what do you guys think? I mean, we had yesterday, we had some folks that were surrounding a Biden campaign bus in Texas and making a mess of Tappan Zee Bridge, right, of Governor Cuomo, Mario Cuomo Bridge, and also the Garden State Parkway. What do you think about what Tish had to say, and where we're at now? I mean, with a day before or hours before people go to the polls on Election Day, seeing all these shenanigans that are taking place. We know that there's a voter protection hotline, which we will keep handy. We're going to post it on all of our sites and make sure that everybody has that tomorrow. So just opening it up to where we're at now, and leave it there.
It seems to me that it says a lot about our current situation that we're having these kind of anxieties. I don't know. I've been voting for, well, I won't say how many years, but let's say a lot. I've never, ever feared that my personal safety, or there would be a riot or other demonstrations as a result of the election, even though when Richard Nixon was elected, I thought the world would end. And it didn't, but now it may well be. But we've talked about how we got here, but it is really an extraordinary situation that people on both sides are anxious about their personal safety that we have to have the Attorney General have a hotline and assure us that the state will protect our physical right to vote.
You know, Lewis's point, I think, is very important, and I think it's worth reflecting upon what the Attorney General said. She's been not just a great champion of the LGBTQ community and, of course, a great supporter of the center, but she also has been really leading with other state attorneys general this mission of voter protection and rights. She has formed coalitions with different attorney general, different law enforcement officials in New York and different state attorneys general as well, to mobilize support for voter protection, voter rights, voter participation. Because it's a national crisis. What really is so alarming about the threatening behavior that we've witnessed, most recently, of course, the Trump caravan surrounding the Biden bus, is the fact that we have a president who applauds this kind of behavior, laughs at it, and at times encourages violent behavior, refuses to condemn white supremacy, or even condemn QAnon, a group that his own FBI director, referred to as a potential domestic terror threat. And so in this climate, the question has to be asked by everyone here and everyone listening and participating tonight: who's speaking up in opposition to this type of conduct? I think it has been stunning how silent the voices have been from Republicans in our state legislature and Republicans in Congress for not condemning this kind of, very frankly, not just violent behavior, but racist behavior as well, and divisive behavior and homophobic behavior. Let's be very serious about it. We always have situations in our environment, in our political climate, where people are going to act out, are going to engage in behavior that is, in fact, oftentimes very divisive. We've never had a president applaud, and he's literally applauded and encouraged and made a mockery of those who protest violence. We've never had a president behave this way, and so we have to ask voters to take into account not just his conduct, but those who remain silent about it. One other final point: I understand that there's people feel intimidated by voting at the polls, but people like my dad and Tom's dad risk their lives defending our democracy. And so many hundreds of thousands of Americans, millions of Americans lost their lives defending our democracy. So don't let a news report or a threat intimidate you from standing up, not just for the right to vote, but standing up for our Constitution, standing up for our country. It's a small act. Go with a friend. And if you don't have a friend, you can certainly call the LGBTQ Center. We'll walk with you to the polls, but don't hesitate to vote. It's a vote, it's not just your right. It's really your mission to protect our Constitution and our nation.
Mm-hmm. Well,
yeah. I'll weigh in. You know, the words of the Attorney General reminds us that what's at stake is not a particular policy. What's at stake are the fundamentals of American democracy. You know, the Republicans have been engaged in a decade-long campaign to suppress Democratic votes. There's a Republican Supreme Court that has eviscerated the Voting Rights Act, particularly pre-clearance. And for the first time in recent memory, we have a president who refuses to commit to a peaceful transfer of power. So when you cannot take for granted a peaceful transfer of power, you're in dangerously uncharted territory. And so it's important not only to win, but we have to win so decisively that there's no confusion about the outcome of the election. Okay? There's no breathing room for the Supreme Court to intervene and tilt the election in a particular direction. And what is at stake is voting rights. You know, if the stars align correctly politically, we can pass a 21st century Voting Rights Act and restore pre-clearance in honor of the legacy of John Lewis. What's at stake is the Equality Act. You know, if we have a Democratic Senate and a Democratic presidency, then we will have the ability to amend the Civil Rights Act to protect LGBTQ people from discrimination in matters of employment, housing, and public accommodation. And, we also, I think it should be reminded, not every American has the right to vote. There are 700,000 Americans in DC that lack the fundamental right to vote. There are 3 million citizens in Puerto Rico who lack the fundamental right to vote. And we might have a historic opportunity to enfranchise, to grant equal representation and an equal voice to 3.7 million Americans whose voices have historically gone unheard. So I'm excited about the possibilities for progressive policymaking in the years to come under the right conditions.
Mm-hmm. Good points, Richie. I mean, to really put it into perspective, both from Robert and Richie, about the environment that's being created by the president, one of violence, one of intimidation, and then the opportunity and how many people are not able to vote right now and don't have that right. And those of us that do right now have to do everything in our power and stand there with dignity and defiance, right, to make sure that we all vote and that vote is counted, that don't want to see another 4 years or even 4 more minutes of what we've been going through. So, and then to start on the agenda to turn around so that every American does have the right to vote, so that DC, maybe has statehood and Puerto Rico as well. Maybe that we actually take a look at the makeup of the Supreme Court, right? And that will be something, hopefully, where when the Democrats are in the majority in the Senate, they're not afraid to tackle, particularly because I think, Tom, you said it earlier about all the judgeships, that are done at the local level, appellate, federal, you name it. And I think, that damage that has been done, all those appointments of packing the court, which the Trump administration did over the 4 years, I think is something that is going to be a long-lasting effect that, we're not even thinking of right now.
I wanted just to clarify something. I think it's appropriate here. Tom, you had said that we were nonpartisan, and we are technically nonpartisan. But you see a large number of people who lean Democratic, if not totally self-democratic. And there's a reason for that. We've invited several Republicans, and they've refused to come. They refuse to come and have their records on LGBT rights, on the pandemic, on Trump, on everything else questioned by us. So these are the people who show up and will be subject to our questioning and make statements on the issues that we regard as important. So yes, we are technically nonpartisan, but we can't deal with the other party, I guess. We look like we're not so nonpartisan.
But Lewis, you don't need to just look to Democrats for criticisms of the crisis we're in as a country right now. President Trump's own former Secretary of Defense, General Mattis, his former Chief of Staff, General Kelly, his former National Security Advisor, McMaster, his former National Security Advisor, John Bolton, right down the list, his former Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson, have all put out blistering critiques about President Trump's unfitness and divisiveness and his threat to the Constitution. So it's not a Democrat or Republican issue in this election. It's a bipartisan commitment to save our country.
No, you're right. But my point was that we can't get the people running. We couldn't get Zeldin. We couldn't get other Republican congressional candidates to come because they weren't willing to be questioned. A couple said they would send a little talking team, but that's not good enough unless we can question them on how they would vote and how their history has been with respect to LGBT plus rights, or as well as other important social and civil rights issues that we care about.
Can I add something to that?
It's also important to point out, though, when marriage equality passed, David will correct me if I'm wrong, I think there were 4 Republican senators who provided the difference in terms of getting that passed in the state Senate. So, the reality is over time, we have had a number of open-minded Republicans on this issue. And I think, Lewis, what you're reflecting is the fact that one of the consequences of the Trump era is just how much the Republican Party has changed. And, I think And I think even the four who voted in favor of equality, they all either lost their elections or couldn't run again. So, I think you've seen a change in the Republican Party in a way that, what you pointed out, that they wouldn't participate, you couldn't get any of them to participate, just reflects the fact that there's a drift because of the impact of the Trump era. So let's hope when we get past it, assuming that happens, tomorrow, that, those more progressive voices in the Republican Party that I think are still there somewhere, that they can start to assert themselves again.
Can I add something to that
Of course.
as well? One of the things that's concerned me lately is I've been going through a number of the candidates who are preparing to run in 2021 for New York City Council. And I've gone through a number of the candidates in Queens. And as far as I can tell, not one single council candidate has on their website even the mention of LGBTQ work, nor LGBTQ issues. And most of them are Democrats. And so I think that it holds true for our community, for the Democratic Party as well, that they owe our community to say where they stand on issues. Where our agenda is not done, it's far from done, and we still have many issues. Some of them are not sexy. One of the things that I'm working on in the council is trying to simply get the city to collect demographic data between people who receive services from the city of New York. We do not collect LGBT demographic data. The teaching of LGBT history in the school system. We don't have any. I've done some work on that, but a lot more needs to be done. So we need in our Democratic candidates to take that position. And I also always like to say, invisibility is our biggest enemy, and we have to make sure that moving forward, every person who's running for elective office does not make us invisible. And that's why I've been really insisting on LGBTQ issues on people's websites.
Yep. And I think
and the internet is how we do campaigning now.
It is. It's how we do everything these days, right? But, just to follow a little bit on what Danny said, I think it's important, for us to remember that, listen, we have to get through tomorrow. Not only get through, we have to do the work that needs to be done to get through tomorrow, right? But beyond tomorrow, we have to make sure that, LGBTQ people are not forgotten, even from folks that no one should really be taking advantage of the LGBTQ vote, right? And that it's real important that, we present the issues up front, but we're going to need those that are elected to make sure that they're protecting our kids, our seniors, and all the other issues, our transgender brothers and sisters, with the policies that are needed. And what Lewis said was that, we wanted to bring everybody on, so that, because it's what we're supposed to do as being nonpartisan, but we think, it's real important we get to a point where we can have dialogue about policy, right? That people are going to come at policies in different ways. And it's important for people to know when they go to vote where people stand on certain issues. And if people don't show up to talk with us, that I think gives us the answer of where they stand. Sure. Aside from if they had a record previously, like Lee Zeldin did as New York State Senator, and by the way, when Tom said that there were 4 New York State senators who voted for marriage equality, none of them were from Long Island. And so, so it's important to know where folks stand. I do want to, we have questions from our audience, so I want to bring them in. I'm excited because we have a record audience watching tonight, by the way, I'm being told. So isn't that like a Trump thing to say? But no, we really do. We have the hugest audience.
But you're telling the truth.
Yes, exactly. So,
it's giggly tonight.
So we have a question from Oscar. Oscar says, many presidential elections have not been decided on election night. Do you think our elected officials should have statements prepared for that proposition to advise people that, while not ideal, it is not out of the ordinary to know what the result may be tomorrow night?
Yes, I think that it's really important to make people aware that oftentimes these elections are not decided on election night. And there have been races that have actually turned around after absentee ballots have been collected, and the person who looked like they were the winner actually then became the loser in some of these races. So that is not unusual, and we need to make people aware of that, particularly because Trump has been telling everyone that the election is rigged. You know, it'd be interesting to see though if he was to win. Then does he think it's rigged? You know, but people do not have that trust in government. We need to make sure that they do, and that they know that this is not unusual.
So I can speak from personal experience. During the primary, I was careful not to declare victory, even though I was confident that I had won because of the margin. I felt strongly that every ballot should be counted before I did formally declare victory. And that's the approach that should be taken in the presidential race. One could easily imagine a scenario in which Donald Trump wins the in-person vote, but Joe Biden wins the absentee vote so decisively that he wins the election. So there should be no premature declaration of victory. I do worry about Donald Trump attempting to prematurely declare victory in the hopes of delegitimizing vote by mail. So I think we should insist that we wait for every ballot to be counted before declaring victory. Okay.
So that I think we've heard Joe Biden say that we may not know tomorrow night, right? And that to make sure that we're patient and that we may not know for a couple of days. I mean, hopefully we do know tomorrow night in a good way, right? When I say a good way, meaning that Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania all go for Biden, that we get a surprise in Georgia or Florida.
Or Texas.
Or Texas.
Or Texas, that would be game over, yeah.
That would be amazing. So, but you know, we need to be patient, and I do think we've heard from a lot of folks. What is coming from the Tom or Robert? You know, what's the message coming from the state Democratic Party or the National Democratic Committee about this?
You know, I missed the clause in the Constitution that says we're required to have the winner by midnight on election night. Obviously. The goal is not to get the votes counted fast, it's to get them counted accurately. And when Donald Trump creates this scenario, raising questions about why it should be delayed, raising questions about why absentee ballots should be received if they're postmarked by election day, why they should be received afterwards. If Trump and the Republicans had any interest in trying to make this a smooth election process, an equitable one, they would not have undercut funding for the post office. They would have provided increased fundings because the demand was there for our state and local boards of elections that are in desperate need of staffing support. This is nothing more than a flawed scenario being created by Trump's campaign and by the president because he can't win on the ballot box. And so that's why there was the rush for Justice Barrett to be put in the Supreme Court, because they need that vote. They've been very clear about their strategy. If it comes down to one or two states, they're going to try to disqualify absentee ballots with one phony argument or one trumped-up argument, if you will, trumped-up argument after another, saying that ballots shouldn't be received after midnight on election night. In New York State, I believe as long as they're postmarked, you have 6 days or 7 days before they arrive at the Board of Elections. Many states do that. There's nothing improper about that. It's called protecting our democracy. So long story short, we just can't be swayed or we can't be sucked into debating the merits. It is legal, it's constitutional, and right now it's about our democracy.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, we've had a couple of other questions about counting ballots also, and folks from New York wanting to know when are the ballots that have been either mailed in early or, you know, people that voted early, are they going to be counted tomorrow as well? Or when will they be counted in New York?
The Board of Elections has said that it could take as long as 6 weeks. I had to wait 6 weeks to find out the results of my election, and the Board of Elections said it could take just as long for the general. So we have an imperfectly administered election system here in New York State, to put it charitably.
Well, the problem with that is that at least at the presidential election. That might be too late for the Electoral College. Although in New York, I doubt that we have to worry on the presidential election. But we talk about the new Justice Barrett being an originalist, and Trump wanting her to be available to vote however he needs her to vote for in the election if it were to come to the Supreme Court. But I want to remind people that originally people voted on election day, but the ballots and the results were often sent by horseback, not by telegraph, not by internet. And it often took weeks for people to know who the winner was, or even have the ballots be counted. But I think 6 weeks today shows that, Tom, maybe you and the governor need to get the Board of Elections revamped because that is not a good thing in today's world.
It's how you're just saying yes. So, no, we do need to, I mean, we take a look at, I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned. I think, Tom, you said in the beginning that, the lines were so long. This is the first time that, for early voting that we've had. It's really the second election that we had. I guess the first was the primary that we had early voting, but this is the first, the first like big election we've had for early voting. And I think, we see we need to expand polling sites. I mean, I live in the town of Brookhaven, and to have 2 polling sites for the largest township in New York is a crime. It's really not a crime, but it really is. And we should have more opportunities for people to vote. But we're learning, right? But to make sure that every vote is counted and counted quicker. Now, there are some counties in New York that will count votes quicker than others. If you're on Long Island and in Nassau County, I wouldn't expect that probably, which is traditionally slow. So Suffolk is a little quicker, but I think the message was said earlier: patience, right? That's what we're gonna need. We're gonna need patience because of the concerns, the illegitimate concerns that President Trump put out there for everyone weeks ago or a month ago. Saying that he wanted a result that night, and we're going to take away how many ever votes that was in Harris County in Texas, people driving in. This is an election unlike any other, not only because of what's at stake, certainly, but because of COVID, the coronavirus, and how we've had to adapt and adjust so that people's safety and lives are protected while they go to vote, to make sure that their voice is heard. So, our final thing to talk about, and I want to somehow get Sammy in if we can get a 7th person on the screen, but is he's waving in the green room, but that is looking at the days ahead, right? So we've led up to this time where folks are just really stressed out. For those that are supporting Biden, that supported Hillary years ago. I remember I was at the Jacob Javits Center 4 years ago. I'll never forget that night. We went there thinking that really the glass ceiling was going to be broken, and no one expected this. But what when I was watching MSNBC today and Steve Konecki, right at the map. And CNN I'll turn on for a second, but every time they have Rick Santorum on, I turn it off. I just don't want to hear him. And going through. So what could the path be for Trump, even though it's an unlikely path, right? So what do we think is ahead? Without maybe being too cautious. What do you really think is ahead in the days ahead?
I think we have a long road ahead of us because no matter what, Trump is going to the results. I mean, there are news reports on MSNBC as well today that he's going to declare victory early tomorrow, and as a tactic. Yeah, I think that he's going to draw this out until January 20th. And I said in 2016 when he was first elected, physically getting the guy out of the White House, I think could potentially be a problem. We'll see. I mean, some of the Republicans have said he'll leave, he will leave, but I don't know. We have a lot of work between Wednesday, this Wednesday, and Inauguration Day.
Okay. How about other folks? What do you think? What's ahead? What's ahead in the days ahead? What should people expect?
We're going to have no definitive. We're unlikely to have a definitive result tomorrow, but I'm reasonably confident that that Biden will win. There were states that historically have voted Republican that appear to be solidly in the Democratic, like Arizona. Biden has what appears to be a substantial lead. He's slightly leading in Georgia. Texas is much closer than it has been historically between Democrats and Republicans. So red states have become purple, and purple states have become blue. All the trend lines point in the right direction. And even if Donald Trump, resists the outcome, I have enough faith in the country that there's not going to be a fascist takeover. I think that the outcome of the one concern I have is the Supreme Court, the unpredictability around what the court will do. But setting aside the court, I'm reasonably confident that Biden will win and that Trump will have no choice but to accept the outcome of the election.
Mm-hmm. All right. Anyone else want to add to that?
It may very well be that one of the results of the Trump presidency is that he is uniting the country in opposition to his conduct. We're clearly seeing, as Richie pointed out, the trend lines where his core groups, white, non-college educated voters that he won by such a mandate, now that margin is cut in half, and Joe Biden's picked up enormous support there. Senior citizens are now, in most national polls, showing they're trending towards Joe Biden, which was formerly a Trump constituency. White suburban voters that he is so pandered to, so divisive, it's not working. But my point to you simply is this. We may know, because North Carolina, the polls close early there. In Florida, the polls close early, and they do count their votes early. That place, we may get a sense as to where this is heading early in the evening. I'm not persuaded of that. I think while we're seeing the red states perhaps become a bit more purple, we're seeing more and more Americans rally in opposition to his behavior. I think it's still a safe bet to assume, and I'd love to be surprised, Texas, Florida, Georgia, North Carolina may very well stay Republican. It may come down to Pennsylvania. It is narrowing, and we can't ignore that. But the fact that Joe Biden's in such a competitive state in so competitive in so many states is very encouraging. Mine is ultimately Joe Biden will win at the ballot. I feel confident that he will in fact be elected president. Donald Trump will in fact do everything he can through the courts, through the media, try to discredit this victory. Even when he won, he tried to discredit. He claimed 3 million people voted illegally. And his own commission proved that he was saying was a lie. When Barack Obama won, he, of course, spread the racist birther lie. He will try to discredit it because that's his game plan. But I have enough confidence in the American people, and I have enough confidence in our political institution that we'll be able to withstand that. And that's my hope. And that's my prayer going into Election Day.
Thank you. Thank you, Robert. And Tom.
I would echo everything that's been said. I hope it doesn't come down to Pennsylvania because the Secretary of State there already made clear that their votes don't get counted for several days, until after the election. So we really could be waiting on this. But I think I would add the following thoughts though. Just like we didn't go away after Trump was elected 4 years ago, we should not think that defeating Donald Trump is the end of the story. There are still going to be many people who are going to vote for him, including in our own communities. If we win the Senate, I think we will. I certainly hope we will. Robert may know better, but it's probably only a 50, 51, maybe 52 if we're really lucky.
That's correct.
It's going to be a close margin there. And, what we really need is some level of healing. We need healing physically in terms of dealing with the virus. We need healing in terms of our economy to get it moving again. We need healing in terms of government budgets at every level to keep vital services going, to keep the nonprofits going. And frankly, we need healing in our own political discourse. We need healing in our own families. I will admit, I have members of my family that are voting for Trump. They did 4 years ago, and by and large, the ones that did 4 years ago, they're doing it again. But we don't have, we can't have those conversations because the discourse has gotten so polarized that you can't have that conversation anymore. We've got to get back to the point that we can have conversations again, that we can, in fact, find some middle ground. And as Democrats, I'll put on the partisan hat with Lewis's blessing, we can't screw it up because you know what? There's another election in 2 years. And what did we see happen? In '92 when Clinton came in, what did we see after Obama's first couple of years? The Republicans took back one or both houses of Congress. So American history, as a Hofstra history major, does have a way of repeating itself. And if we win, as I think we will, the Senate and the White House, and have an even stronger Congress, and we have great leaders like Richie Torres in leadership, we better not blow it, because we're going to have a short window to show that we can do things differently. Because if we don't, we could easily lose the Senate in 2 years, maybe even the House. And that's why, from my perspective, I think Joe Biden, of those on the Democratic side that came forward, is the one best positioned because of who he is and his long history to be one to encourage an atmosphere of healing. And I think of reasonableness so that the Democrats can have an agenda that will move the country forward, but will not scare those in the country who didn't support the Democratic ticket. It's going to be a fine balance. We need that FDR moment that Richie Torres spoke about, but we need it to be one like FDR was able to achieve, where he in fact created a coalition that kept him going for 3 presidential elections after his first one. We cannot have our own arrogance. We cannot have our own sense that we know better. I think we should view a Democratic victory as a gift, as an opportunity, a responsibility, but we need to win back, some of those folks that we lost. We need to win back some of those folks that were taken in by the Trump rhetoric. And I think we can, and I think we will, but it has to be with a perspective of healing and inclusiveness in every way. Inclusiveness, including Republicans and thoughtful independents as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Very well said. And Danny, were you going to who's adding to that? Someone knows.
No, I 100% agree with what the controller just said.
If I could add one more, for me, I think the fundamental issue here is competence. If the Democrats win, we're going to have the burden of showing the American people that we can govern competently. If Donald Trump loses, he would have lost largely because of COVID. I'm convinced that COVID-19 is to Donald Trump what Katrina was to George W. Bush, that it's such a shocking display of incompetence that most Americans are recoiling in horror and are going to punish him on Election Day. But we have to be careful as a party, Democrats, not to be paralyzed by our own ideological infighting. An FDR moment comes once in a century, and you have to strike when the iron's hot, and you have to govern effectively and not let progressive purity be the enemy of real world progress. So hopefully, and I just want to echo what Tom DiNapoli said, I think Biden is exactly the right leader for this moment because he's a pragmatist, because he knows the legislature, because he has a deep well of relationships in Congress.
Mm-hmm. Very well said, Richie. I mean, I think that, there's going to be a lot of work ahead, and, and it's and a lot of responsibility, right? And hopefully with it will come the votes so that the power will be there, and to move the agenda forward. And the Democratic agenda is a big one, I think, is a wide, whoever thought we'd be saying with a big tent, right? That we have, a lot of ideas all the way to the left, to the middle, and the middle's just as fine as the left and vice versa, and that there needs to be some coming together and stop attacking one another when we pretty much all stand on the same side, and are trying to achieve the same goals of fairness, equality, justice for all, whether it's social justice, whether it's economic justice, and that's what we need to do. So Louis, This is our final vote proud town hall. Let's get Sammy on the screen here if we can, so that he's been patiently waiting in the. And I apologize if we lose someone because we're supposed to have 7 people on here. Did we lose Richie? So Sammy. So
Hi.
just like Lawrence on MSNBC, The Last Word, we're going to give you the last word before we close.
So I as a recovering politician and public official and longtime campaigner, I'm gonna boil it down. We learn in our training. You got to make the ask. You got to make the ask. Don't end the call. Don't end the door knock. We're making the ask. I want to make the ask, and I'll say, the basic unit of democracy at the atomic level is a vote, is a single vote, and there are people who are trying to obstruct that vote, and they either don't understand democracy, or they are actively trying to exclude you from that democracy. So all the agita, the sleepless nights scrolling through Facebook and the early mornings watching the news shows, all of that tension, all of the nervousness, this is your opportunity to channel it and actually do something about it. And that's get out, vote, get your mom to vote, get your brother to vote, get your sister to vote, get your partner to vote. It all comes down to this. You have to vote. So I'm going to make the ask. Can we count on you to vote tomorrow? That's
Yes.
the only question that matters right now. And thank you. I really want to thank everyone, David and Lewis, for doing this throughout the throughout this whole season. Vote Proud is only one thing, and as board chair, I have to. It's incumbent on me to say, Vote Proud is one initiative that the network has really used to make the best of these hard times during COVID. But there's so many other examples of how the organization has pivoted and remained relevant to the people that needed us the most, particularly during this time. And we couldn't do without the support, of great people like, Robert and Tom, who have been great supporters, always there for us. And of course, Danny Drum. And I'm very much looking forward to seeing Richie Torres in service. So thank you very much. And again, I'll say it again. Can we count on everyone to vote?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. We
Make
will.
the ask.
We will all vote. And I want to thank, and as Lawrence O'Donnell had said, Sammy Chu has the last word tonight. But I want to thank Robert. I want to thank Tom. I want to thank Danny and Richie. Not just for being on here tonight and staying for our Election Eve special, which has gone longer because it's real important. But also for the support and the leadership that you have demonstrated for decades. You have been trailblazers. It's made my job a hell of a lot easier. It's made the lives of so many people so much better and more enriching and safer. I know we'll continue to do that moving forward, no matter what the results are tomorrow night. But we know that we're hoping we will have positive results. But no matter what the results are, the fight continues. And that, until we don't have to say the words coming out, we have a job to do. So Lewis, I'm gonna turn it over to you to close. And this is not gonna be the last you're gonna see of Lewis and I, because we're talking about keeping this dialogue going on. So be on the lookout for what we're gonna do next.
Yeah, we have to worry about what's going to happen next tomorrow, one way or the other. But I want to thank all of our guests tonight. We've had a great group of guests this campaign period. And I hope that David has been saying that our viewership has been increasing. So hopefully we've been giving messages and information to people that they find valuable and helpful. So again, thank you to our panelists tonight and our guests. And look out for an announcement of the next installment.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone. And as Sammy said, vote, 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 vote. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Richie. Thank you, Danny. Thank you, Sammy. And most of all, thank you, Lewis. It's been just it's been an honor and amazing to host these Vote Proud New York segments that we have done, and really have energized and motivated and engaged so many people to get registered to vote, to go out to vote, and to get active. And I look forward to continuing in the future. And everyone vote, 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 vote. And I'm sure our next one will be a happy recap. So thank you so much, everyone.
Good night.